I am to talk about the role of data in healthcare, and that's certainly something that we understand greatly. So what I'm going to talk to you about is I'm going to, in fact, talk to you about how we see data. Then I'm going to talk to you a little, since it's a business school and we founded a business in IBM called Watson Health, I'm going to talk to you about the founding of that business. Then I'm going to talk to you about how we think about data, cloud, and AI. And then I'm going to talk to you about some of the AI offerings and their use in the real world. Okay? All right. So, and I'm going to wrap this up within, where's my timekeeper? Oh, there we are. I'm going to make sure I wrap this up in 40 minutes. So I don't know. I didn't have the privilege of sitting here all day, and I like to walk. There's not too much place to walk here, but I like to walk when I walk, so I'll come over here and I'll do the data thing over here. Maybe we talked about this morning, but healthcare data is growing at a rapid rate. In fact, we estimate that by 2020, it will be doubling every 73 days, which is astounding. But let's take that a little bit more down into what we can think about. Everyone here goes to a physician. How many of you have stayed 1 or 2 days in a hospital in your lifetime? In the past 5 years, how many of you stayed 1, 2, or 3 days in a hospital? If you have, your electronic health record is probably the size of a Harry Potter book. Now, so, I mean, no, really, a week-long stay at an American tertiary care hospital gives you an electronic health record that is thousands of pages long. Now, I want you to just think for a moment that you're a primary care physician and you're going to see your patient right here a year after she stayed in the hospital, and you want to do a good job in the 7 minutes that you have with her, and her electronic health record is 1,000 pages long. There is not much insight you're going to gain from that in the 30 seconds you have before you meet with her. Now, this might be the reason that primary care physicians now work 11.2 hours every day. Your primary care physician works 11.2 hours every day, which wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't that 6 of those hours a day were spent on documentation tasks on that electronic health record. And the result of this, they're 7 minutes with patients. The amount of patients that they have to see and working relentlessly 11.2 hours a day, we are having a significant problem in the U.S. that we call physician burnout. And in fact, estimates are that 55% of all physicians are exhibiting some effect of burnout. And it could be that radiologists that we talk a lot about, radiologists actually spend 64% of their time not looking at images, not diagnosing images, but 64% of their time they spend mining that electronic health record that is thousands of pages long, just simply to find information that can help them in the diagnosis of the image. And then finally, all of this data, all of this research, all of the clinical trials that are going on generate 8,000 pages a day of medical information. Now, on average, a human could read maybe 150 articles a year. And I said 8,000 pages. It's actually 8,000 studies or journals or whatever a day. And so this is the data explosion. So people say data is doubling every 73 days, but if we take it down to what does that really mean? That means physicians who have to read thousands of pages of electronic health records, but they can't. Life sciences researchers to keep up would have to read 8,000 articles a day, but they can't. Radiologists to ensure that they are looking at the entire health record when diagnosing an image simply cannot do it, simply cannot do it. And this was actually part of the reason that Watson Health was founded. So let me just step back for a moment and do a little bit of a business school case here. We are very lucky because at IBM we have a group that's called IBM Research. Principally, they're in Yorktown, New York, and what IBM Research is a research institute. You know, they did in fact help NASA get to the moon. We have many renowned scientists at IBM Research, and they do primary research. We also have grand challenges every couple of years. In 2005, the grand challenge was, in fact, what will the future of healthcare be in a decade? And the researchers at IBM Research said in 2005, the future of healthcare will include artificial intelligence. And when there's a grand challenge, there's funding that goes along with it. And so groups of researchers in IBM Research spun up research projects looking at artificial intelligence in healthcare. And so there was a group in Almaden, California, who started to work with Kaiser Permanente on reading both the cardiovascular images as well as the electronic health record text associating with them, reading using artificial intelligence to read. And then there was a group in Haifa who started working with healthcare institutions in Haifa, in Israel, to look at deep learning in breast imaging and the text analytics in the breast imaging. There was a group out of Yorktown who started working with Cleveland Clinic on how do we read the electronic health record. And meanwhile, in IBM Research, there was a group also who was simply working on natural language processing and teaching a system to read. That group played the famous Jeopardy game in 2011, which showed, yes, in fact, we can teach technology to read. We can read fast. We can read everything that is in Wikipedia, and then also press a button and answer a question faster than a human. Now, I don't usually talk about Jeopardy too much in my speech because I am at Watson Health, and I think the things that happened after in Watson Health are so much more important than Jeopardy. But the important thing to know for a business school thing is that after the Jeopardy game, remember, there was no Watson Health at this point. There was IBM Research. After the Jeopardy game, Memorial Sloan Kettering came to IBM and said, you know what? We would like to see if we could teach technology to replicate what our oncologists do so that we can take the knowledge of Memorial Sloan Kettering to places in the world that do not have the renowned oncologists that Memorial Sloan Kettering does. And so at that moment, really, IBM started to work with Memorial Sloan Kettering on seeing if we could expand MSK's knowledge in oncology to eventually bring their knowledge to other places of the world. So now all of this research was building up in IBM Research, and Ginny Rometty in 2014 looked at it and said, this is really astounding work, and it could help transform healthcare, but we're not going to be able to do it if we just keep it in a research mode, and we are not a healthcare company. So what we'll need to do is we'll have to stand up an independent business unit and go into healthcare. She took it to the board at the end of 2014. The IBM board agreed, and so Watson Health was born in April of 2015. With really this notion of data is exploding, we can find the invisible data in that data and make it visible, and we can help augment intelligence, both to oncologists, primary care physicians, life science researchers, and the healthcare continuum. So Watson Health is formed in April of 2015. Because IBM was not a healthcare company, they stood up an independent business unit called IBM Watson Health and bought some companies to really give it some mass. If you're in the business of artificial intelligence, cognitive technologies that we call it, it's important that you have data. So the first companies, in fact, provided data that technology could learn from. We bought a company called Explorus, a small company out of Cleveland, Ohio, but those guys were rock stars. And what they had done was they had linked up to providers, and they would take into a big data lake, reservoir, and system electronic health records every day and provide insights back to the providers on performance metrics relative to their healthcare system. We still, of course, have the Explorer system today, and today we take in 400,000 providers across the U.S., their electronic health records. And I'm going to talk more about data in a moment. The second acquisition that was bought to form Watson Health was called Phytel. It's a population health company. Population health is very important these days, and Phytel does population health on 30 million Americans. The third company we bought was the company called Merge. It was a picture archiving and communication company, an imaging system company, and they vendor-neutral archive, of which there are 30 billion images in the Merge archive. And the fourth company that we bought was a leader in healthcare analytics, really the leader in healthcare and analytics, Truven Analytics. And of course, all of these are part of our company, of Watson Health today. So at Watson Health, we think about it this way. We think about a cloud and a data layer. We think about it, AI services layer. And then we think about the 5 vertical segments which we serve, which are imaging, government, health and human services, life sciences, value-based care, payers and providers, and imaging, or oncology. But those 5. It's Watson Health. So we were founded almost 3 years ago. We are growing very fast. I'm going to talk more about some of the work we're doing at the third part of my speech today. All right. So how do we think about this? That was sort of data explosion, why we need to do something about it, why Watson Health was formed. And we do think about this in 3 layers. So the first, data. I just walked in while the panel was talking, and somebody said data is hard. And I want to say, we know a lot more about data today than we did 3 years ago. People are fond to say a couple of things about data today. They're really fond to say, we have access to 30 million health records, or 100 million health records, or we have access to 200, we have secondary use rights to 210 lives. But that means nothing unless you had prepared it properly. And I tell you that we spend a tremendous amount of time of those 400,000 providers of which we take in their electronic health records. We have quite a robust ingestion engine. We spend a tremendous amount of time curating that data. We put it in a data model, the unified data model for health, and then we make it analytically ready. We have thousands from Truven Analytics. We have thousands of measures and metrics that make that data mean something useful. And of course, we build off of the experience that Explorus had in taking in the electronic health records. When we had Explorus was the first acquisition, Truven came second. Explorus primarily had electronic health records. Truven primarily had claims records. We thought to ourselves, we're going to put these together in the same data lake, and will we find new insights? So we have done that. So both it's important to say that both sets of data are de-identified. Both are de-identified, but if you want to combine them together to see if you can get insights combining claims and clinical records together, of course, you have to identify them, combine them, and de-identify them again. It's a lot of work. Goes into that health model. We did that, and what we find is, well, yes, in fact, you do find different insights when you combine the clinical and the claims data together. For example, if you were going to look just in a claims database, you could perhaps look for acute coronary disease patients who had a stent or multiple stents put in, and you could follow whether they had complications or whether if they went in for new stents or what their effects were for drugs. You could find that pretty much in the claims data. But if you now combine it with the clinical data, you can see what manufacturer the stents were and what complications come from which manufacturer or what the outcomes are by manufacture of stents. So it's very interesting, plus others as well. So it's how we think about data. We do have a tremendous amount of data, and we make that data available for our use as well as our partners' use, and we are not of the belief that we should hoard that data. All right. Second thing is cloud. So there's a lot of talk of cloud today. And what I want you to know about our cloud is we build our health cloud specifically for health. So we have all of, in this country, the privacy measure is called HIPAA. In Europe, it's called GDPR. We build our cloud that is privacy ready for health, that is security ready for health, but it's built for two other things. And I'll talk about our data principles at the end. But our cloud is built to protect our clients' data. We like to say your data is your data, so our cloud is built, the Watson Data Platform, to protect your data, and our cloud is also built to run our AI services. Part of the reason we can do what we do today in artificial intelligence is because we have the compute power in the cloud. But in order to leverage the compute power in the cloud, it is important that your cloud is tuned to run AI services. And so the IBM cloud, and we build the Watson platform for health on top of the IBM cloud, is tuned for these three things. It is tuned to protect your data, it is tuned to run Watson, and it is tuned to particularly protect and secure healthcare data. Okay, so data, cloud. On top of this, now I told you that this research started in 2005. Any artificial intelligence method that you have ever heard of, we started in 2005, and the IBM research team is really actually very super smart. So any artificial intelligence method that you have heard of, we have tried on varying data sets. But today, if you are a partner or a client of IBM and you go to the web page of Watson Health, you will find 80 AI services, 80 AI services that help you build offerings in healthcare. I'm going to talk about 3 of them in a minute, but we use these AI services to build our offerings, and our clients also use these AI services to build their offerings. First, I'll talk about 3 of the AI services, and then I'm going to talk to you about some of the offerings and the outcomes. So, for example, we have an AI service that is called Insights from Patient Data. What Insights from Patient Data does is it actually reads that 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 page electronic health record, reads through it, and derives insights from the electronic health record. A lot of what we do in Watson Health starts with reading through the electronic health record. And in almost every example that I give you, I'm going to talk about reading the electronic health record. But not only is that used in what we're doing in imaging and oncology, but it's also used to help, for example, the Cleveland Clinic generate problem lists from the electronic health record. Another AI service that was developed is called Patient Similarity. Patient Similarity does exactly what it says. It matches patients like me to patients like me. And so in a patient cohort, we can do dynamic population health is always typically done with static patient cohorts. Show me the 10,000 patients that look like a female 45 to 55 years old with diabetes and congestive heart failure, and I want to track what works properly for her. With patient similarity, we can actually do dynamic patient cohorts. So the patient sitting in front of you, we can run through and the data in that health system, 100,000 records, we can do a dynamic patient cohort of a patient that looks like the patient sitting in front of you, who is on a particular treatment, what has happened to patients that look like him in your system. And a third AI services we call medical insights. And with medical insights, we read through medical literature and we derive insights for it. Largely, this is used in life sciences, and I'm going to give you some examples for it. But I want you to know that one of the things that Watson does extraordinarily well is to read through medical data. In fact, we read 5 million papers a quarter. All right, so Watson Health, founded in April of 2015, based on the work done, the outstanding work done by IBM Research. We think about it as a data layer in a cloud with 80 AI services, and we bring these services to 5 segments. I'm really going to talk about 2 of them today, given the time that we have, and I was told that what you'd like to hear about is life sciences and oncology, so I'm going to talk about those 2. Life sciences. Are you all familiar with Immuno Oncology? Have you heard that? So Immuno Oncology is a cancer treatment that uses your body's own immune system to fight the cancer. Do you know that there are 1,000 clinical trials going on in the US today for Immuno Oncology targets? 1,000. Now, if you know anything about clinical trials, the next thing you would tell me is it will be impossible for those 1,000 trials to get populated. In fact, 50% of all clinical trials fail because there's not enough patients to get enrolled in the trials. It's a real problem. So imagine you're a life sciences researcher, and your goal is to find an immuno-oncology target that will get through the clinical trial process and come out at the end of it with a drug that is really going to, or a therapy that is really going to help people. You need to find a target that you not only think will work on the affected gene, but you also need to find one that you think will be able to get a trial populated in the time frame you need it to get out to make a difference in the world. There are 8,000 papers written every day. And now a fair number of those happen to be on immuno-oncology because people have just, we've discovered that you can use a person's immune system to fight the cancer. It is a daunting task. Typically, the front end of the life sciences discovery phase, when you find your target, takes 18 months. We developed an offering called Watson for Drug Discovery. What Watson for Drug Discovery does is we work hand in hand with life sciences researchers. Nothing that we do alone. 100% of what we do with partners, and 100% of what we do augments intelligence. So Watson for Drug Discovery works hand in hand with life sciences researchers to, 1, help them sort through all of that literature, the 8,000 pages of publications a day, and then to help them make associations between genes and drugs and proteins. Pfizer is our premier partner on Watson for Drug Discovery. Pfizer is in fact using Watson for Drug Discovery to help shorten that upfront time to find immuno-oncology targets. In fact, the head of the commercial operations and science for Pfizer says Pfizer is like a wingman of sorts, helping the life sciences researchers find the information they need to identify those targets that can get through clinical trials that can help people. At the end of, she says all the time, the patient is waiting. The patient is waiting. Anything that we can do to help shorten the time from discovery to use helps, and Watson is a wingman. Barrow Neurological Institute also used Watson for Drug Discovery, and they used it to identify genes that were associated with Lou Gehrig's disease. What Watson did, working hand in hand with Barrow Neurological Institute, was to sort 1,500 genes from 1 to 1,500 as to how Watson felt they affected Lou Gehrig's disease. Barrow Neurological Institute then looked at the top 10 and said, yes, it looks like these 10 actually do affect Lou Gehrig's disease, and 8 of them we've never seen before. We didn't know affected Lou Gehrig's before. They took the top 5, they did further research on them, and they have now validated with their paper in Acta Neuropathologica that these 5 that had never before been identified do affect Lou Gehrig's, and now we can start the work of identifying targets that can work on those genes to help Lou Gehrig's disease. This is important because it shows that artificial intelligence, augmented intelligence, Watson for drug discovery can actually help in wet lab research. And then the final one that I'll talk about for Watson for drug discovery was at Toronto Western in Ontario, Canada. Toronto Western used Watson for drug discovery to look at Parkinson's disease. And in this case, what Toronto Western wanted to do was it wanted to see if there were other drugs that were approved in Ontario that would deal with Parkinson's that they had not previously seen. So once again, using Watson for drug discovery, we read in everything that was publicly printed about Parkinson's disease. It was 20 million articles. We read the 20 million articles in about 4 weeks. We read everything in, we looked for the brain protein associated with Parkinson's disease, and we looked for every drug associated with that was beside that brain protein. We then rank ordered, when I say we, I mean Watson, we then rank ordered those pharmaceuticals that we found from 1 to however many we found. There was over 200. Toronto Western looked at the top 52, said, oh yes, these 52 do seem to affect Parkinson's. 22 had never before been used in Parkinson's disease, and now Toronto Western is investigating the 22, which are approved in Ontario, to see if they will be of good use for their patients. So, offering number 1, Watson for drug discovery, using artificial intelligence, sitting on a lot of data, reading extraordinarily fast, and helping life sciences researchers finding drug targets faster. Let me change gears a bit, because another thing that we wanted to talk about here was, is data really helping people today? So two apps I want to talk about, if you will. One is from a partner of ours called WellTalk, and the second is from a partner of ours, which I'm sure you've all heard of, called Medtronic. Medtronic was one of the first partners that IBM Watson Health partnered with. And what Medtronic wanted to see is that could we use artificial intelligence to help type 1 diabetes patients make decisions in their day-to-day life. So the first thing that we did was actually a very hard thing. We started with 600 patients, and then 2,000 patients, and then 10,000 patients that were in the Medtronic CareLink database. And we used Watson to see if we could create an algorithm to predict the onset of a hypoglycemic event. Now, a hypoglycemic event is every type 1 diabetic patient tries to avoid a hypoglycemic event, and oftentimes they run hot to avoid a hypoglycemic event, and typically you have about 5 minutes of warning before you have a hypoglycemic event. What we were able to create with Watson, with an over 90% accuracy, was the prediction of a hypoglycemic event within 3 hours, or we got a 3-hour window that we could predict a hypoglycemic event. This was very hard, and we were all very, very proud of it. Then we did something very simple. And when Medtronic, we were doing the clinical trial for Sugar.IQ, we put some more functionality in the app, and one of the functionalities in the app was to simply allow type 1 diabetes patients to follow the foods that they were eating, and they would follow the foods. We would show them graphically what would happen to their blood glucose as they were eating these foods, in a way to help them make decisions on their day-to-day living. Now, all right, so you can follow any food you want to, and what's the number one food that the patients followed in the diabetes app called Sugar.IQ? Somebody guess. What? What do you think the number one food is? Dunkin' Donuts. And it's like Kentucky Fried Chicken was number 2, and the top 5 were some junk food from some fast food service. So we laugh at all that, right? We laugh at all that. But as you know, you might know that type 1 diabetes patients need to make 300 to 400 decisions every day on what they eat. And, I don't know why they wanted to follow Dunkin' Donuts, but what we did find is that after this very simple thing of allow them to follow their food, they were able to stay within their blood glucose range 65% more of the time. So we did something really hard that we were all very proud of, the prediction of a hypoglycemic event within 3 hours of over 90%, but then we did something very simple, which was allowing people to follow their foods, and in fact, that might have more of an impact than the really harder thing. Our partnership with WellTalk, as we use it in IBM as well, WellTalk is now the premier app for employers who want to provide an app so that patients can understand their benefits or they can help you live healthier. And what WellTalk has used Watson for is to really make it for patients like me. So, for example, there is a congestive heart failure app in Cafe Well from WellTalk, and what that app allows congestive heart failure patients to do is similar things. We learn from the patient, we learn when he gets up, when he walks, what he eats, how he feels, and then we provide personalized insights back to the patient on, when you get up at 8 o'clock, this is how you feel, and maybe you want to get up a little earlier, or when you eat your lasagna and you have congestive heart failure and diabetes, you always tell us you don't feel so well, so maybe you don't want to have the lasagna in the beer, maybe just have the beer instead of the lasagna. And so, WellTalk is actually being extraordinarily successful in providing those personalized insights back to patients. And in fact, they are one of our top. There are 115,000 patients now who have been processed through some sort of Watson application, and WellTalk's patients are among the leaders there. All right, so that's the list. So what I talked about the need for data. I talked about how Watson Health was formed. I talked about our data lake, our cloud, our AI. I talked about augmenting intelligence for life sciences researchers, 2 apps, and I'm going to end on oncology because I think are there any Memorial Sloan Kettering? Yeah. So our very good partner at Memorial Sloan Kettering. I started with this, right? I said after the Jeopardy game, Memorial Sloan Kettering came and said, we would like to see if we can teach technology to think the way an oncologist would think so that we can take our knowledge of oncology to other parts of the world. Why is this important? Why is this important? We're sitting in New York. Luckily, if one of us gets cancer, we can go to Memorial Sloan Kettering. We will probably get a very nice, long length of caring time to talk with our oncologist about our disease and our treatment plan. However, if you live in China or you live in India, where we sit here, and for every oncologist that sees a patient, the ratio is 1 oncologist in New York to about 130 patients. In China, it's 1 oncologist to 800 patients. Into India, 1 oncologist to 1,600 patients. They don't have the time, teaching, research, or learning to know what our Memorial Sloan Kettering oncologists know. If you are a cancer patient in China, you queue up at 8 o'clock in the morning with the other oncology patients. You wait for your time to see the oncologist. It might be in a room this size where you're sitting and the oncologist will walk from person to person, and on average, you get 3 minutes. At the front end of that now, we have Watson for Oncology trained by Memorial Sloan Kettering. We started commercializing this in January of 2016. We essentially had breast cancer finished at that time. At the beginning of 2017, we had 4 cancers trained in Watson for Oncology. Today, we have 13 cancers trained in Watson for Oncology. And not only the Memorial Sloan training, the Memorial Sloan Kettering training for those cancers, but alongside that, we show the NCCN guidelines, and we show relative medical literature that would be helpful to patients. So now you are an oncology patient in China. You still get your 3 minutes with your oncologist, but before that, your data is uploaded from the electronic health record into Watson for Oncology. Watson for Oncology provides the treatment recommendations that Memorial Sloan Kettering would recommend, provides any other interesting guidelines and data to help patients understand their disease. The oncologists like it, but more the patients like it. What we hear from patients is they feel like they are getting access to the best medical care in the world. What we hear from patients is they understand their disease better. And what we hear from patients is that they are extraordinarily grateful for information that is given to them that they can trust. A study came out in The Oncologist by our partner, the lead investigator, by our partner in India, the Manipal Hospital. It is the 4th largest hospital system in India. They see 10,000 cancer patients a year. They did a study matching the recommendations coming out of Watson for Oncology. They did a study matching the recommendations coming out of Watson for Oncology to what their tumor board would recommend, and we achieved 93% concordance level. What about the other 7%? Is Watson wrong the other 7% of the time, or is Watson providing augmented intelligence to those oncologists? Well, I'll leave you with this story. At the University of North Carolina, we did a study that has now been published in The Oncologist. 1,000 patients. It was a retrospective study. It was looking back at what was recommended for those 1,000 patients. Both Watson, in this case, it was Watson for genomics because we were looking at the genetic sequencing of the patients, the genetic profile of the patients. Watson for genomics and University of North Carolina, 99% of the time, agreed that there was a genetic alteration that could be treated. That was about 718 patients. But in 306 patients, Watson found a treatable genetic alteration that the tumor board did not. And in 96% of those patients, at the time we did the study, were still alive and could benefit from some type of gene immunotherapy or some kind of drug. Why was Watson able to identify more alterations in 306 patients and match them to a treatment? Most of the treatments that we found were released in 2014, 2015, or 2016. And this gets to the essential premise that I started with. Healthcare data will double every 73 days by the year 2020. It is impossible for a physician, a life sciences researcher, or anyone to keep up with that amount of reading. But Watson can. Watson reads fast. Watson helps find the invisible data and makes it visible and brings it to be, as Memorial Sloan Kettering will call us, the trusted advisor. We augment the intelligence of life sciences researchers, physicians, primary care physicians, oncologists, and radiologists. When Watson Health was formed, the team got together in very good business school style and said, what is our mission? What is our mission? We're a tech company. We are made up of largely people who have worked in healthcare technology companies before. Most of us did not work in IBM before. And this is the mission for Watson Health. We want to help improve lives and give hope through innovation to the world's most pressing healthcare challenges through the power of data in cognitive. I'm very proud of the mission statement. I want you to know that the 7,000 employees of Watson Health live that every day and are striving to use data and cognitive insights to provide offerings that will help transform healthcare. So thank you very much for having me here.